Post Scriptum is by no means an easy game. I've been playing this game for probably hundreds of hours I've clocked up now across the last few years, and similarly with Squad. In fact, with Squad, I've been playing that since pre-alpha in 2015, so it's been a very long time playing these games. And today I wanted to give you my pro guide to Post Scriptum, all of the tips and tricks that I have to play the game incredibly well. I think you guys have come to appreciate the quality of gameplay you see on the channel here and there. We dropped a video the other day with 55 downs. A week before that it was 75 downs, and it was just real hardcore action that you want to see from a Post-Scriptum game. And I kind of want to reveal how I get round to doing these things, how I'm so accurate with my weapons, and everything in between. This is by no means a beginner's guide to Post-Scriptum. If you've got a rough grasp of the game, this is something you're going to want to watch. So first of all, let's start off with settings. I get asked about settings all the time, and there are a few things I do. First, I like to downscale how obvious the friendly indicators are in the game. I often find that nameplates and stuff tend to obscure my view too much. This is entirely personal preference, so play around with it a little bit, but at the moment I think I have it scaled down to about 80 to 60%, and I've slightly increased the range at which they appear because I often end up getting killed or killed by friendlies, or even, popping the odd friendly in the back of the head, which happens to all of us, so I tend to increase the range on that ever so slightly in the settings. Those are under gameplay, and in terms of graphics, nothing really special here. I play this game at 1440p, which I highly recommend. If you can upgrade from 1080p, do it, because it's massively important for these games. I play at 1440p with a 165Hz G-Sync monitor. Like I say, if you can make the jump to G-Sync or the AMD version, I forget what it's called, FreeSync, that's what we're looking for. If you can do that, do it, because it's incredibly good for these games. It massively reduces artifacting and visual tearing, and it makes these games look and feel 10 times better, I promise you. If it's an investment you're looking to improve your experience, I highly recommend it. Graphical settings, I have a kind of mixture, because I like things to look good for YouTube. Mostly everything is on a medium to low, except for effects, textures, and view distance. I put all of those as the highest I possibly can, view distance especially, but of course that is scalable to your system. If you can't handle that, feel free to bump those down, but keep view distance as high as humanly possible, and disable things like distance shadows. Those things shouldn't be on. I disable things like ambient occlusion, bloom, all of that stuff. These effects do look fantastic when the game is running like a cinematic, but in terms of competitive natures or in terms of making good shots, it's a setting you wouldn't want to have. The only thing I do leave on though is lens flare, just because I think it makes the game look a little bit more pretty. But again, that's personal preference. If you want pure competitive settings, drop everything down to a medium or a low, keep view distance on epic, and disable all of the extra features like eye fixing and vertical sync and, ambient occlusion. Just turn all of those off. They make the game look terrible, and they likely will tank your performance as well if you're looking to get higher frames. I tend to average anywhere between 80 and 120 frames on both Post Scriptum and Squad using a 2080 Ti, so I can imagine that most people will be looking to save frames where they can. Audio is hugely important, and I have my Squad comms and local comms turned up to 180% just so I can hear them a bit more clearly, because the game is, by its nature, incredibly loud. I use an Astro A40 headset for those of you who are interested. That is a fantastic headset for audio quality. I highly recommend it. Again, if it's an upgrade you want to make, I'm sure if you have headsets at home that you like, stick with those, but I'm just making suggestions based off of what I own and what I use. Other than that, audio settings being set to epic and graphical settings, I don't really do anything beyond that. I play at a 95 field of view. I don't like decreasing or increasing field of view too much, because in Squad and Post Scriptum your field of view determines your aim down sight zoom, and that is a big problem in these games, because I would like to play with a higher FOV, but it's just not an option at the moment. And you have to make sure you can zoom as much as you can to make sure you can spot those distant targets and make sure you can take care of them. So let's get into gameplay. Let's start talking about the key things I do. Let's start talking about everything I know about this game that makes my standard and level of gameplay so consistent, and how I've pushed it to the level I have, which I like to think is pretty good. Feel free to disagree with me there, but I like to think I place Squad and Post Scriptum to a very high standard these days, and these are the things I do. So step one, let's talk about how I find so many enemies and how I manage to deal with them. and I have a 3-step process on Post Scriptum. Number 1, I look for enemy markers. Number 2, I look for entrances and or exits from objectives. And number 3, I tend to flush out locations that aren't occupied by friendly teammates. Post Scriptum works as a very reactive game. Infantry on the ground, be it defending or attacking, will react to the first little bit of gunfire they hear. Now, I don't tend to, describe teammates this way because I do like working with my team, but everybody in your team, including your squad mates, are what I like to call bullet fiends. The second they hear a gunshot, they're heading in that direction because they want to get kills and they want to have an action-packed game. And I'll be honest with you, I tend to prescribe the actual opposite of that. I think that Post Scriptum working as a reactive game where everybody runs towards the first gunshot fire they hear is not what you want to be doing. In fact, you want to be seeking out the sources of gunfire themselves, but doing it in a way that's of a flanking manner. If you notice in Post Scriptum and watch my gameplay, I use every single defile, tree line, bush line, anything that works as hard cover or concealment to work my way towards enemies, even if it means I have to take a route that takes an extra 300-400 meters to get around to them. At the end of the day, one good flank is better than one half-assed flank where you open fire early, get killed because you've decided to run straight at them, and, it's just not going to work out for you. And for the most part, enemies will always work towards a direction that is the most direct to get onto an objective, or if they're flanking round to an objective, let's say you're defending something. And I have a great bit of gameplay in the video here where I'm literally just punishing the enemy team for doing exactly that. I worked my way round to these guys by flanking around numerous bush lines to make sure that they couldn't see me. And I knew that they were going east directly onto the objective because that's what everybody would do. And once you play Post Scriptum for long enough, you'll come to understand that there are very simplistic things people do. They go to any gunfire they hear, they will go for the most direct route to objectives, and they will always look for buildings to further their cause. Everybody loves hard cover. It makes us feel nice and safe and secure in Post Scriptum. So if you're looking for an MSP, if you're looking for enemies, if you're looking for anyone, it's likely in some desolate building in the middle of nowhere, away from the objective, but direct enough to get onto it. And very simplistically, I go up to these guys and I murder them all, because I knew that they were coming from that direction, they didn't expect me to be there at all, and it was very easy to mask my gunfire with the bullets that were being fired in that general direction, and them making their own noise. In fact, this general method of flanking and my way of making towards enemies and making sure I take care of them is so effective to the point where they were in the same bush as me and they didn't know I was there. They knew that something was going on, but every time there was an explosion or a distant tank firing, that's when I take my opportunity to drop enemy players, and I think it's very effective at what I do. So again, look for enemy markers. If you see enemy markers and nobody's there or nobody's heading in that general direction, go to that direction. That hasn't just been randomly called out, In the most part, I find most people in Post Scriptum are very good at calling out enemy locations, they just don't like dealing with it themselves. Number 2, look for gaps in your defense. Often there are going to be loads of people in one location. Again, great example in this gameplay here. Nobody wanted to leave the rail bridge, even though there were people attacking from the east and from the south, because I could see that there were enemy markers there. People had died in those locations, or there wasn't markers where people had died in those locations, which made me suspicious. And 3, it's just an obvious location to put an enemy MSP or spawn point. You want to attack from directions people aren't expecting, so expect the unexpected, so to speak. And again, look for friendly players dying. Friendly players don't get killed often 200-300 meters out. That's a very rare thing to happen, and only happens when a highly skilled player is on the enemy team. People tend to die in the sub 100 meter range, so if somebody gets dropped, likelihood is if nobody's called it out, nobody's marked it, nobody's mentioned anything about it, there is going to be people there and they will be beelining towards your objective as fast as they possibly can. And finally, and I mean this very sincerely, both whilst attacking and defending, use every single bush, every single tree, every single defile, dip, drop, water, dive you possibly can to get towards opponents. You'll very rarely, and I mean very, very rarely, catch me running out in the open in Post Scriptum. In Post Scriptum, I'm always using these methods of transport. I'm always using a street that's got loads of buildings as cover, or I'm using a bush line that I can use to get towards where I want to go. And I use these things very methodically. I don't ever let myself be exposed. I make sure that if I'm using a bush line, I know I've got cover on the left or right side of the bush line if I get stopped. I know I've got smoke grenades. I know I've got grenades in general. The only time you'll ever catch me running out in the open towards an objective or towards a location is when I know for damn sure the enemies are looking in the other direction. In fact, I've got another fantastic example here in this gameplay again, where I knew the enemies were looking directly from east to west onto the objective point because that's exactly where they wanted to go. I was attacking somewhere from the south, I think it was the southwest, and I knew they wouldn't really be looking my direction. I could actually see a muzzle flash fire towards the direction of the objective, because they're all like, haha, guys over there, gonna blow them up. And they wanted cheap kills and they wanted to be on the objective. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm out in the open here. I should probably start running because this guy's probably going to kill me. And I realized that he was so fixated on that location, so fixated on the objective and where the friendlies were, that he didn't even care that I was there. If he saw me, I was probably a glimpse out the corner of his eye that he didn't pay any second mind to, because he saw cheap kills, or he saw explosions, or he heard gunfire. And he was immediately fixed into that location. And I just creeped up on him and I took care of him. And I did that with numerous enemies in this general game. So that's the reactivity I look for, you know. I look for those enemy markers, and if there's not enemy markers, I look for where my friendlies have gone down. And then I look for hills, defilades, places that are advantageous both defensively or offensively. If I'm on the offense, you know, I'm looking for a piece of high ground or some hard cover, somewhere I can make myself useful. If I'm on the defense, I'm looking for those places again, but as a place that I'm going to be attacked from. I'm looking for houses where people could put MSPs. I'm looking for, you know, thick wood lines where people can put their MSPs and hide rally points. And all of these are very obvious in this gameplay here today. I can actually point out every location to you that I think enemies would be or they would set up shop, and that's exactly why I was able to find them. And all of this just comes with general game knowledge, you know. There is no enemies are definitely an X, Y, or Z. There are no UAVs in this game, you know. You simply just have to think and find, and that's just how it works. So we look for the markers, we look for friendlies that have gone down, we look for advantageous positions, and then finally, we look for things like tree lines and bush lines, because those are the things that enemies are going to utilize to come towards you, and those are the things you are going to utilize to go towards enemies. And it's actually a very deterministic game, so to speak. You know, once people come from the east, they're always going to keep coming from the east. They're always going to keep probing the east, the southeast, the northeast, and it's not going to change very much. People in Post Scriptum like to run at the meat grinder and never seem to accept when things aren't going their way. You know, that just tends to happen. And, you know, I was in the south, I was in the north, I was directly on top of these guys when I was flanking them from the east, and, you know, not once did they try to change their pattern. They were like, hey, look, I just got wiped out by one British dude who blew up our rally point, and they just kept coming. They were like, yeah, you know, it kind of worked. It really didn't, but, you know, the mindset in Post Scriptum is not to try and change. So those are my three key principles in terms of how I find opponents. And it actually links in incredibly heavily with how I handle my weapons. You know, people say to me that I'm relatively or pretty damn well accurate in Post Scriptum, or that they wish they could match my level of accuracy. And often I tell them that I actually don't really play that much with keyboard and mouse. I only do it for hardcore shooters, and I've only actually really taken PC gaming seriously in the last year and a half, 2 years. You know, this isn't muscle memory by now, by any means. The reason I find myself incredibly accurate in Post Scriptum is because I watch my tracers. You know, guns in Post Scriptum aren't difficult to handle, especially the semi-automatic rifles. Always look for your tracers, because your tracers are your best indication of how close or far away you are from hitting your opponent. So I watch my tracers as best as I humanly possibly can, and that's how I determine things like distance I need to put my gun forwards, tracking distance and stuff like that. So if an enemy is running 50 meters away and he's running to the right, I know just how much to the right my gun needs to be in front of him in order for me to make that shot so the bullet hits him as he's running. And that stuff comes with time. You're going to miss loads of shots in this game. It's very... I miss all the time, you know. I get some good, you know, streaks of shots that go through, but for the most part, I do miss quite a few bullets, and it just comes with acclimatizing yourself to how to aim at your targets and how to hit them at different ranges. And the other thing I do, which is something that really bothers me that lots of people don't do, is always check your map. You know, I see far few people pulling up their map as often as I do. Your map is essential for three things. One, figuring out where your enemies are coming from, like I mentioned before with the 3 steps that I use. And number 2 is ranging. You know, in the bottom right corner of the map, it tells you that a grid square is so and so many meters. I think it's 100 meters per grid square. And it tells you how many 3 or 4 grid squares are. And if you know that information, and you know that one grid square is 100 meters, and you have a rough approximation of landmarks, you know, I always look for landmarks in this game, you know, like the start and the end of a bridge. Where are those on the map? You know, where is so and so building or church on the map? And if you know one grid square is 100 meters, for the most part, zeroing in this game to hit people at distance is not difficult whatsoever. You know for a damn fact that you can hit someone 400 meters away because you've checked and the building they're in is roughly 3 or 4 grid squares away. And yeah, you probably will miss a shot, but just go for what your most accurate and reasonable interpretation is. You know, I have a great video the other day, in fact it was yesterday's video, where I was a British sniper, and I'm going to pull up some of that gameplay here for you now. And in this gameplay, you know, I was roughly thinking, you know, these guys must be 300-400 meters away, you know. Looking at the map, they're at least 3 grid squares away, maybe 4. There were no clear landmarks, but you could roughly approximate it looking at the bush lines they were running from and the buildings that they were running from, and I was like, yeah, 300-400 meters makes sense. So that literally takes me about 3-4 seconds to look at the map and go, roughly there. And in time, if you're a new player or if you're a recent player, it really does just take, you know, 3-4 seconds. One block is 100 meters, they're 3-4 blocks away, no problem. And I managed to nail them, and I was quite impressed with myself because, you know, it's been about a few weeks since I played Post Scriptum, and, you know, I was just getting back into the swing of things. But it was just simple information on my map that made that targeting so much easier than what I see these days. Because I just see people scoped in at 100 meters, and they're like, yeah, let me just, like, fire up in the air. Use zeroing. Zero your weapon to the grid squares you're seeing on your map. That is the fantastic way to end all of your targets. And even if they're not directly to your east or west and they're to your north or south, you can use the grid squares diagonally as well, and you can use them horizontally and vertically. Because if I am south and somebody is north, yes, they are just 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks away of 100 meters. And there are 3 individual blocks within each block of 100 meters. So that's probably, what, 33, 66, 99 meters in an individual 100 meter block. And if I know that information, and I know each block vertically, horizontally, or diagonally or anything is going to be 100 meters in total, and there's a target, you know, let's say I'm in the center and somebody's to my northeast, he is diagonally, however, what distance he is away from me. And all I need is a rough landmark, be that a bush line, a building, or something that makes that area recognizable. And I can use either the whole 100 meter block or the individual 3 blocks within that 100 meters to identify how far away diagonally he is from me. And finally, your map is massively important for identifying friendly players. I have shot a number of friendlies in my time. It happens to all of us, but like I say, increase the distance at which that name tag is visible. Just reduce the size. You don't need to know their name if they're 100, 300, 400 meters away from you. You just want to see a blue dot or something telling you not to shoot them in the face. And yeah, really, that's about it from me. You know, I never really do anything special, you know. I know my guns roughly how they handle. Semi-auto rifles handle pretty easily. SMGs are a pile of trash. You have to aim really high if you want to shoot something far away, and you can only really kill anybody up to 100 meters with them. I know my rough equipment, I know my LMGs, and I just treat every gun as though it's a tool, you know. I play towards strengths of automatic and semi-automatic weapons, knowing how slow and fast they are. You don't see me playing aggressively with a Kar 98 because it's the slowest semi-auto rifle. I'll play aggressively with the Lee Enfield because it's the fastest semi-auto rifle beyond the M1 Garand, which is my favorite rifle in the game. And if I have an automatic weapon, then I'm getting up close and personal into people's faces. If I'm using an MG, I'm making sure I'm behind the push, because being at the front of the push with an MG that you have to bipod before firing is a liability. And it's clear decision making like that and playing towards the strengths of your class, combined with understanding your map, combined with understanding travel time for bullets, which I have demonstrated roughly in this video here, and combining that with how I figure out how to take on enemies, where they are, what they're doing, where they're going to go, and how obvious it is that they're going to run to the first bullet or objective they see, that make up how I play Post Scriptum, and it makes up how I get my games, and how I get, you know, 75 kills with a French sniper rifle rifle, or 55 kills with a British sniper, or however many kills with this SMG in this game. I think I was close to like 30 downs or something. But in the context of things, bearing in mind most people were just sat on the bridge going, hey, I can shoot people trying to cross the bridge because it's nice and easy. I think a lot of my kills actually seriously faltered the enemy advance from the east onto the bridge. Because even in the game, and I can pull this up, I actually said to these guys, look, an MSP has just flown past southeast. My squad lead hasn't marked it. No one in my team has marked it. I put it on the group chat, the whole main team chat. Nobody has marked it. And I told them, in 30 seconds or so, you are going to get absolutely destroyed from the south. Lo and behold, 30 seconds later, not a single one of them. They were like, oh, there's enemies east. I'm going to still shoot the enemies from the east. They were fiending the enemy opponents. They just wanted easy kills. And despite the fact that I told them 2 whole squads were coming their way from the south, not a single one of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them looked that way. And the rest of them just got chewed up eventually because they weren't expecting the attack. And they didn't bother processing that information. I processed the information that a tank had gone down or a piece of armor had gone down. I processed the information that we had lost friendlies to the south, 1 or 2 of them, but enough nonetheless. And I processed the information that somebody said that there was an MSP somewhere east. So when it zoomed past me to the southeast, I was able to make that call, figure out where it was roughly going, because again, they don't want to make a 200-meter walk to the objective. They're going to put it somewhere nearby. And lo and behold, I end up intercepting them on the way to their objective. I get killed because it's 2 squads, you know, there's only so much I can do. I actually run out of explosives at that point as well, so I couldn't really grenade them or try and hit them by surprise. But I took out maybe 1, 2, 3 of them. And I told my entire team that there was an entire enemy squadron heading their way. A crap ton of people, and not a single one of them reacted, because they were looking for the cheap kills, the easy gunfire, and the easy gunshots and sounds that they could go to and get cheap kills from. And if you are able to process information on a map level in Post Scriptum, you will be one of the best players and most effective players on the field. Anyways, folks, that's it from me today at TacticalBrit on my pro guide. If you have any questions, any queries about absolutely anything in the game, be it the dumbest or smartest question, because there are no dumb questions about Post Scriptum. It's a very challenging game by any means and circumstances. Feel free to ask me in the comments section and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching this video. Hit this like button if it's helped you. Let me know anything in the comment section below. As always, folks, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in another video.